The salt of the Athenian sea was a taunt to Milara. Each spray that stung her face was a ghost of the deep, warm, singing waters of her home, a world now reduced to the weight of iron on her wrists and the map of scars on her back. On the grand warship Oracle, she was not a siren, a creature of coral palaces and hypnotic melody. She was a slave, a trophy from a conquered southern isle, her dark skin and strange luminous eyes marking her as other, made to serve the heir to the throne of Athamas, Prince Adonis. Adonis, with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of a glacial lake, had regarded her with pure revulsion. She was a savage, a mute, for she had never spoken his tongue in his presence, a living insult to his refined existence. He issued commands with cold disdain, and she obeyed with a silent, flawless dedication that seemed to irritate him profoundly. But weeks turned into months on the endless blue. Milara, her siren's magic suppressed by the cold iron manacles, poured her innate grace into her service. She learned the ship's rhythms, anticipating needs before they were voiced. She mended his uniforms with impossible delicacy, remembered his exact preference for wine, and stood as a silent, steady statue during his tempers. Her dedication was a language of survival, a deep-seated need to impose order on her chaos. Slowly, Adonis's disgust thawed into curiosity, then into a baffled respect, and finally, into a treacherous, deepening emotion. He began to speak to her, not at her. He confessed his fears of failing his father, his secret desire to be a scholar rather than a soldier, his loneliness within the gilded cage of his title, things he said he could never tell his courtiers or his betrothed, the Lady Valentina. He started to see the keen intelligence in her eyes, the stories written in the subtle shift of her shoulders, the profound strength in her silence. He was falling in love not with a myth, but with the woman. One night, under a blanket of 1,000,000 stars, the sea was calm as black glass. He found her at the ship's railing, staring into the depths, her profile etched by moonlight. The only sounds were the sigh of the waves and the creak of the ship. "Milara," he said, his voice hushed, intimate. She turned, her heart a trapped bird beating against her ribs. These moments had become her oxygen, these quiet exchanges where he was just Adonis. She loved the weight of his thoughts, the unguarded honesty in his face, the way he looked at her as if she were the only soul on the water. She loved him, a secret as vast and dangerous as the ocean itself. He moved closer, the heat of his body a palpable force in the cool air. "I have been a fool," he breathed. "I saw chains where I should have seen dignity. I saw silence where I should have heard strength. You have become the most real thing in my world, Milara. Your presence is a calm I have never known." He reached out, his fingers hovering just above her iron manacle. The gesture was so tender it was a physical pain. "I cannot imagine my future without you in it," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "Not as a servant, never again as that, but as my equal, my companion, my love. I will free you. I swear it. I will." "Adonis, what is the meaning of this?" The voice was a whip crack in the stillness. Lady Valentina stood there, her beautiful features twisted into a mask of outrage. She was a vision in silk, her golden hair gleaming, but her eyes were pure venom. She looked from Adonis's guilty, earnest face to Milara's terrified one. "Consorting with the livestock now," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "Has she enchanted you with some primitive spell? Or are you so weak that you debase yourself and the throne for a taste of something exotic? Valentina, you will hold your tongue," Adonis commanded, stepping forward, his own anger flaring. "Or what? You will choose her." Valentina laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Think, you fool. Your father will have her head on a pike before dawn. Her life is worth less than the dirt on my shoe. And if you pursue this, I will make sure she suffers for it in ways you cannot imagine." The threat was real. Valentina's family was powerful, her cruelty renowned. Milara knew with chilling clarity that Adonis's love was a death warrant. He was a prince. He would be scandalized. She would be executed. Or given to Valentina. The beautiful dream he offered was a mirage. Reality was the iron on her wrists and the murderous promise in Valentina's eyes. Adonis was arguing, his back to her. His focus on Valentina. This was her only chance. Her heart shattered. She looked at Adonis one last time, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the sound of his voice defending her. She loved him. And so, she had to vanish. With a strength born of utter despair, she wrenched her arms apart. The ancient, weakened iron of the manacles, corroded by sea and time, gave way with a sharp crack. The sound made both Adonis and Valentina turn. For a second, Milara stood free, the broken chains falling to the deck. Her eyes met Adonis's, filled with an apology and a love so profound it stole his breath. Then she turned and vaulted over the railing. Milara, no. Adonis's scream was raw, shattered. He lunged for the rail, Valentina's shocked gasp forgotten. He stared down into the black water, expecting to see her struggling, drowning. But instead, he saw a ripple of silver. A figure, graceful and powerful, sliced through the waves. For a breathtaking moment, her form seemed to glow with a faint, ethereal light, and the water itself seemed to sing a single haunting note of farewell. Then, with a flick of a powerful shimmering tail that was there and gone in a blink, she dove deep, disappearing into the endless, dark embrace of the sea. She was gone. Not lost but home. Leaving Adonis alone at the railing, staring into the emptiness, the broken chains at his feet the only proof she had ever been real. Adonis paced the space of his golden coral room, thinking of what could have befallen Milara. He blames himself for not helping her. He had to do something before a worse fate comes upon. By the seas. He would do everything in his power and beyond to find and protect her. The door to Prince Adonis's chambers swung open without a knock. Valentina stood there, backlit by the torches in the corridor, a vision of calculated allure. She wore a gown of deep crimson, cut low, and her golden hair was loose around her shoulders. In her hands, she carried a silver tray with a decanter of rich, amber wine and 2 goblets. Adonis, seated at his desk with his head in his hands, didn't even look up. The scent of her perfume, heavy with jasmine, invaded the room. "I heard you've been brooding all day, my love," she said, her voice a silken purr. She closed the door and glided in, setting the tray down with a soft clink. "You must not let that creature's disappearance trouble you so." At the mention of Milara, Adonis's head snapped up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face a mask of grief and anger. "Do not speak of her." "Why not?" Valentina asked, feigning innocence as she poured the wine. She handed him a goblet, her fingers deliberately brushing his. "She was just a slave. Strange, wild thing. You are a prince. Your mind should be on your kingdom." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "On your future wife." Prince Adonis could not hold it together. Milara, you locked a portion of his heart he never knew was there. He paced the length and breadth of his golden corral room, lost in thought of how to get Milara back. He wanted her, he needed her. By the seas. He would find her and seek his father's blessings. Lost in thought. He didn't know when the door to his chambers swung open without a knock. Valentina stood there, backlit by the torches in the corridor, a vision of calculated allure. She wore a gown of deep crimson, cut low, and her golden hair was loose around her shoulders. In her hands, she carried a silver tray with a decanter of rich, amber wine and 2 goblets. Adonis, seated at his desk with his head in his hands, didn't even look up. The scent of her perfume, heavy with jasmine, invaded the room. "I heard you've been brooding all day, my love," she said, her voice a silken purr. She closed the door and glided in, setting the tray down with a soft clink. "You must not let that creature's disappearance trouble you so." At the mention of Milara, Adonis's head snapped up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face a mask of grief and anger. "Do not speak of her." "Why not?" Valentina asked, feigning innocence as she poured the wine. She handed him a goblet, her fingers deliberately brushing his. She was just a slave. Strange, wild thing. You are a prince. Your mind should be on your kingdom. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. On your future wife. She moved behind his chair, her hands coming to rest on his shoulders. Her touch was meant to be soothing, seductive. Forget her, Adonis. Let me help you forget. Let us solidify our bond. The court whispers that your affections have strayed. Let us show them how foolish that is. Her fingers began to knead the tense muscles of his neck. I can be everything you need. Adonis stiffened. He had once found her beauty captivating, but now it felt like a painted mask. Her words were hollow, her touch like ice compared to the memory of Milara's silent, warm presence. He stood up abruptly, shaking her off. He turned to face her, and the cold fury in his glacial eyes made her take a step back. Get out, he said, his voice low and deadly calm. Valentina's seductive mask slipped, revealing a flash of shock and spite. Adonis, I am only trying to. I said get out, he repeated, cutting her off. Your performance is wasted on me. I am not one of your courtier fools to be manipulated with wine and whispers. Leave. Now. Humiliation burned on Valentina's cheeks. She drew herself up, her eyes glinting with venom. You will regret this, she hissed. You choose the memory of a fish over your rightful queen. I choose honesty over deception. Now get out of my sight. With a sound of disgust, she swept the wine goblets off the tray, sending them crashing to the floor. Then she turned and stormed from the room, leaving the scent of jasmine and betrayal in her wake. King Apollos looked up from his war maps as the doors to his throne room were thrown open. Lady Valentina stood there, her face a masterpiece of distressed beauty. Tears streamed down her perfect cheeks, and her body trembled with what appeared to be genuine anguish. Your Majesty, she cried, rushing forward before collapsing in a graceful heap at the foot of the dais. Forgive my intrusion, I did not know where else to turn. The king, a stern man with a beard of iron gray, frowned. Lady Valentina, rise and compose yourself. What is the meaning of this? She rose, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. It is Prince Adonis, my king. I fear for his mind. That creature, the siren slave. Her magic has a hold on him that he cannot break. King Apollos's eyes narrowed. Explain. She did not just run away, sire. She enchanted him first. She has woven some dark, southern magic around his heart. He speaks of nothing but her. He rejects me, his rightful betrothed. He refuses to eat, to sleep. He says he will call off our engagement and search the ends of the earth for her. Her voice broke into a convincing sob. I fear if she is not found and her spell broken, the prince will be lost to us forever, and our alliance will be shattered upon the rocks. She knew exactly which chords to strike. The king's face darkened from curiosity to thunderous anger. An enchanted heir was a weak heir. A broken engagement was a political disaster. Superstition and rage warred within him, and rage won. Enchantment, he boomed, his voice echoing through the hall. A slave dares to bewitch the heir to the throne of Athamas. He slammed his fist on the arm of his throne. Captain of the guard. The doors flew open and the armored captain entered, bowing. Dispatch every ship. Every horseman. Comb the coast. Find this siren witch. I want her found and dragged back here in chains before the sun sets. The search was brutal and efficient. They found Milara not far from the shore, weak and disoriented, drawn back by a foolish longing heart that had hoped to catch one last glimpse of Adonis's ship. She offered no resistance as the heavy, new iron chains were clamped onto her wrists, more brutal than the last. She was dragged back into the throne room, thrown at the king's feet. She looked up, her luminous eyes wide with terror, shaking her head, trying to form words in their harsh tongue to plead her innocence. King Apollos looked down at her, seeing not a woman, but a monster from a storybook, a threat to his bloodline and his kingdom. "You used foul magic to ensnare my son," he pronounced, his voice cold and final. "For this crime against the crown, there is only one sentence." Milera found her voice, a hoarse, desperate whisper. "No, please. No magic, love. Only love." The words were broken, alien, and to the king, they sounded like a confirmation of a sinister spell. He waved a dismissive hand. "Take her to the dungeons. At dawn, she will be executed as a witch and a traitor. Let it be a lesson to all." Her pleas turned to sobs as the guards seized her. She cried out for Adonis, for mercy, for the sea, but her words were lost on the deaf ears of the court and the cold heart of the king. She was dragged away, the sound of her despair the only melody left in her, fading into the dark, cold stone of the dungeon corridors. The dawn was a cold, gray smear across the sky, the color of a fresh bruise. In the central square of the port city, a crowd had gathered, their murmurs a hungry buzz. In the center stood a simple wooden platform. Upon it Milera knelt, her head bowed. The cold, damp air bit through her thin shift. The new, heavier manacles on her wrists were anchors, pulling her spirit down into the dirt. She did not look at the faces in the crowd, nor at the hooded executioner standing patiently to the side. She looked at the horizon where the sea met the sky, and tried to hear its song one last time. King Apollos sat on a raised dais, his face carved from stone. Beside him, Lady Valentina watched with a viper's smile, her eyes gleaming with vindictive triumph. "Let this be a lesson," the king's herald boomed, his voice echoing off the cobblestones. "To all who would practice dark arts against the crown. This creature, this siren, used enchantment to bewitch the heir to the throne. For this treason, the sentence is death." The executioner stepped forward, hefting his heavy axe. The crowd fell silent. Milera closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. "Halt!" The command shattered the silence, not from the dais, but from the edge of the square. All heads turned. Prince Adonis, still in his riding clothes, cloak billowing behind him, strode into the center of the square. His face was pale, etched with a night of anguish and resolve. He did not look at his father. His eyes were locked on Milera. He walked directly to the platform and placed himself squarely between the executioner and Milera, his back to her, shielding her. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Valentina's smile vanished. "Adonis!" King Apollos's voice was a thunderclap of fury. He rose from his seat. "What is the meaning of this? Step away from there at once. This is not a game." Adonis finally turned to face his father, but he did not move. "It is not a game, father. It is a travesty. Release her. She has committed no crime. She has enchanted you," the king roared, his face purpling. "She has clouded your mind and turned you against your own blood. Can you not see it? Look at you, defending this thing on the day of her execution. This is proof of her witchcraft." "It is not proof of witchcraft," Adonis said, his voice rising, clear and strong enough for all to hear. "It is proof of my failure. My failure to see her, to protect her, to speak the truth sooner." He turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over the stunned crowd before returning to his father. "She is no enchantress. She is a woman of more strength, grace, and dignity than any I have ever known. She is not a thing. Her name is Milera." He took a deep breath, the words he had held back for so long finally breaking free. "And I love her." The silence in the square was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the distant docks. King Apollos looked as if he had been physically struck. He descended from the dais, his steps slow and heavy with disbelief. He walked up to his son, stopping mere inches from him. The crowd watched, breathless. "You are bewitched," the king hissed, his voice low and trembling with rage. "You do not know what you are saying. This is the spell talking. Move." Aside. I am not bewitched, father, Adonis said, his voice softening but losing none of its steel. I am in love. The crack of the king's hand across his son's face was like a whip. Adonis's head snapped to the side. A trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his lip. He slowly turned back to face his father, his gaze unbroken, unwavering. The act was no longer just about saving Milera. It was a rebellion. It was a prince choosing his heart over his crown in front of his entire kingdom. King Apollos saw it too. He saw the defiance, the utter lack of repentance. He saw his legacy, his obedient son, crumbling before him. The insult was too public, too profound. You wish to shame me, the king whispered, his voice dangerously quiet. You wish to throw away your birthright, your duty, your people, for this madness you call love? Adonis said nothing. He just stared, his resolve answer enough. Then so be it, King Apollos spat, his voice rising to a shout that echoed through the square. If you choose her, you choose a life without this family. Without this crown. You are no longer my son. You are no longer a prince of Athamas. You will be banished, cast out. You will leave this city with nothing but the clothes on your back and this creature you profess to love. And you will never return. The crowd erupted in shock. Valentina looked horrified. This was not the outcome she had wanted. Adonis did not flinch. He did not beg. He simply bowed his head, not in submission but in acceptance. Then I accept, he said, his voice clear and calm. He turned his back on his father, his throne, and his entire world. He walked to Milera, who was staring up at him, her eyes wide with shock, terror, and a dawning impossible hope. He took the executioner's axe and, with a few mighty blows, shattered the chains that bound her. He pulled her to her feet. She was trembling. Without a word, he took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Then Prince Adonis, heir to the throne of Athamas, now a man with no title and no home, walked with his siren through the parted silent crowd. He did not look back at the king he had defied or the city he was leaving behind. He walked toward the city gates, toward the unknown, holding only the hand of the woman he loved. 2 months passed in quick succession. The young couple had never been happier. The world they had built was small, humble, and theirs. Their home was a sea cave on a forgotten stretch of coast, its entrance hidden by a curtain of cascading kelp and glowing anemones. It was furnished with salvaged driftwood, woven seaweed mats, and shells Milera had arranged with a siren's innate artistry. The air was always cool and carried the constant, soothing sigh of the ocean. They lived as the simplest of peasants, Adonis learning to fish with a spear, Milera gathering tender seagrasses and sweet crustaceans. They had nothing, yet they were rich in a way Adonis had never known. One evening, as bioluminescent fungi painted the cave walls with soft blue light, Milera watched Adonis mend a tear in his only tunic. His hands, once accustomed only to holding a scepter or a sword, were now calloused and capable. "Adonis?" she asked, her voice soft, still hesitant with the wonder of being able to speak freely to him. He looked up, a smile instantly touching his lips. "Yes, my love." "Why?" The single word held the weight of a kingdom. "You had everything. Throne, future, your people. Why did you give it all up to free a slave?" He set the sewing aside and took her hands, his thumbs stroking the faint, faded lines where the manacles had once bitten into her skin. "I did not do it just to free you, Milera," he said, his gaze earnest. "Though that reason alone would have been enough. I did it to free myself." She looked at him, puzzled. "My entire life was a script written by my father," he explained. "Every word, every action, every alliance was for the glory of the throne. I was a prized stallion in his stable, and Valentina was the chosen mare. When I met you, your silence was the first honest thing I had ever known. Your dedication came from your soul, not from a desire for favor. You showed me what real strength looks like. Defying him, choosing you. It was the first truly free choice I ever made. I gave up a gilded cage for the open sky. For this. He gestured around their simple cave, but his meaning was clear. He meant for her. And I did it for this, he whispered, leaning forward to press his forehead to hers. For the love I have for you. It is the most real thing I have ever possessed. It is worth more than any crown. Tears filled Melara's eyes, and she kissed him, pouring all her love, her gratitude, and her own fierce devotion into it. They held each other in the gentle blue light, two exiles who had found a complete world in each other. The peace was shattered by a sudden, violent rush of water. A horde of men, their faces obscured by hardened leather masks, surged into the cave from the underwater entrance. They moved with brutal efficiency, trained fighters who knew their target. Adonis was on his feet in an instant, shoving Melara behind him. He grabbed his fishing spear, the only weapon at hand. He fought with the desperate strength of a man protecting everything he loved, his royal training resurfacing. He was a whirlwind, disarming one man, cracking the spear shaft across another's face. But he was one against a dozen. They overwhelmed him, pinning his arms, forcing him to his knees on the sandy cave floor. Another two guards dragged a struggling Melara down beside him. What do you want? Adonis roared, struggling against the hands that held him. Gold. We have none. Take whatever you see and go. A figure emerged from the shadowed angle of the cave entrance, moving through the water with a familiar, hated grace. She pushed back the hood of her diving suit. Valentina's beautiful face was twisted into a smirk of triumph. But I don't want your trinkets, my love, she purred, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. I told you I would have you. One way or another. Adonis stared at her, disgust and rage warring in his eyes. You are mad, Valentina. I banished myself from an entire kingdom to be free of you. What makes you think this will change anything? Her smirk vanished, replaced by raw, furious hatred. Because this time you don't have a choice, she shrieked, her composure shattering. You will watch me kill her, and then you will come with me, broken and grateful that I spared you. Or would you like to watch her suffer first? Adonis's voice was ice. I would rather die in this cave with her than spend a single breath as your prisoner. His final, absolute rejection was the spark that lit her fury into an inferno. With a scream of rage, she drew a glistening pearl-handled dagger from her belt. But she didn't turn toward Melara. She lunged for Adonis. If I cannot have you, then no one will. Time seemed to slow. Adonis braced for the blow. Melara, seeing the blade aimed at his heart, felt something primal and ancient break open inside her. A power she never knew she possessed, unlocked by terror, by desperation, by a love so profound it could not be silenced. She threw her head back and screamed. It was not a human sound. It was the fury of the deep, the pressure of the abyss, the devastating cry of a siren whose heart is being torn apart. The water in front of her mouth visibly rippled, condensing into a visible, concussive wave of sound. It hit Valentina and her men like a physical wall. The masks shattered. The men were thrown backward as if by a giant's hand, their bodies convulsing before going still, floating limp in the current. Valentina was hurled against the cave wall with a sickening crack, the dagger spinning from her lifeless fingers. Her eyes were wide open, frozen in a moment of shock, before the current carried her body away with the others. Silence. The cave was still. Adonis stared, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at the floating bodies, then at Melara. She was trembling violently, her eyes wide with horror at what she had done. She looked at her own hands as if they belonged to a stranger. A faint, shimmering aura, like sunlight on a wave, flickered around her and then faded. Melara, Adonis whispered, scrambling to her side. She turned to him, her expression one of utter shock and exhaustion. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed forward into his arms, completely unconscious. He held her tight, his own heart hammering against his ribs, staring at the deadly aftermath of her voice. They were safe, But the world had just become a much more terrifying and mysterious place. Back in the gilded palace of Artemis, the silence in the grand throne room was heavier than any ocean depth. King Apollos sat on the sunken throne, carved from the helm of the first king's ship, but it felt like a prison of his own making. The reports had been thorough and undeniable. Valentina's body, and those of her hired knives, had been found in a remote sea cave. Their cause of death was not by blade or blunt force, but by a force the physicians could not explain. Their inner ears shattered, their bodies lifeless yet unmarked, as if the sea itself had roared its fury. He had ordered the death of an innocent woman. He had banished his only son. The memory of Adonis's face, blood trickling from his lip but his eyes blazing with a truth Apollos had been too proud to see, haunted him. He had called it witchcraft, but the report spoke of a power far older, far purer. It stirred a memory ancient and dusty, from his own lessons as a boy. An old prophecy, whispered by seers and etched on crumbling scrolls in the royal archives. When the crown is blinded by pride, a queen will rise not from our blood, but from the deep. Her voice will be the ocean's wrath, her heart its compassion. She will unite the fractured waters, and a son of the sunken throne, redeemed by love, will rule beside her. He had dismissed it as a myth. Now it felt like a verdict. A fortnight later, a single, unmarked skiff approached the hidden cove. King Apollos stood at its bow, dressed not in royal regalia, but in the simple robes of a statesman. His guard, for the first time, remained at a respectful distance. Adonis saw them first. He stepped in front of Milera, his body tense, a sharpened spear in his hand. His face was hardened by betrayal and the fight for survival. "Father," he said, the word a challenge, not a greeting. "Have you come to finish what your would-be daughter started?" Milera stood behind him, her eyes wide with fear. The memory of the attack, of the terrifying power she'd unleashed, was still raw. King Apollos did not step forward. He held his hands open, empty. The gesture was so foreign from him that it gave Adonis pause. "I come," the king said, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely showed, "to beg your forgiveness." Adonis's grip on the spear tightened. A trap woven with pretty words is still a trap. "No trap," Apollos said, his shoulders slumping. He looked old, the iron in his beard now seeming like rust. "I was the one who was blind. I was proud and cruel, and I listened to poison because it suited my own narrow view of the world." His eyes shifted to Milera. "I called you a witch. I was wrong." He took a hesitant step onto the sand. The reports of Valentina's end. They described a power not seen in ages. It reminded me of an ancient prophecy of our people. Of a goddess queen, born of the ocean, whose voice could command the waves and whose reign would bring unity and peace. His gaze was full of awe and a profound, shameful regret as he looked at Milera. "You are her." Adonis and Milera exchanged a look of pure astonishment. "You expect us to believe this?" Adonis asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "After you sentenced her to death." "I expect nothing," Apollos said, his voice thick. "I can only plead. I am an old man, Adonis. I have ruled with an iron fist, and all I have forged is loneliness and a son who hates me. The throne. It needs its rightful rulers. It needs its future. It needs you." He looked at them both. "Both of you." He did not command. He did not order. He stood before them, a king humbled, a father seeking redemption. Adonis looked at Milera. The fear in her eyes had been replaced by a dawning wonder. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "We will return," Adonis said slowly, his eyes never leaving his father's. "But not as prisoners. Not as political pawns. We return as ourselves." King Apollos bowed his head. "You return as you are. As you were always meant to be." The return to Artemis was not a sneak attack under cover of darkness, but a triumphant procession. Word had spread like a tidal wave. The lost prince and the goddess queen from the prophecy were returning. The streets were lined not with fearful subjects, but with cheering crowds, their voices rising in a joyous cacophony that rivaled the sea itself. In the great hall of the Coral Palace, under the vaulted ceiling of mother of pearl, the coronation was held. No longer was it just for a king. The high priests anointed Adonis's brow with salt water and oil, placing the crown of woven sunken gold upon his head. Then they turned to Milera. They brought forth a second crown, one not seen for 1,000 years, forged from moonlight and abalone, shimmering with a soft internal light. As they placed the crown of the deep upon her dark hair, a collective gasp of awe swept the room. She seemed to glow, her beauty and power now recognized and revered. King Adonis and Queen Milera turned to face their people, their hands clasped tightly. He, the prince who chose love over a crown and found a greater kingdom. She, the slave who was truly a goddess, whose voice held the power of destruction and creation, and whose heart held the power to forgive. They ruled not with an iron fist, but with wisdom drawn from the depths and compassion learned in exile. And in their reign, the prophecy was fulfilled, the fractured waters were united, and Athamas entered a golden age of peace, forever under the benevolent watch of the prince of the sunken throne and his goddess queen from the deep. They lived truly and completely, happily ever after.